Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the RFM audio production channel, where we try to get your mixes glued together. In today's episode, I'm going to be taking you through proper stem mixing / mastering. I'll be going through the differences between stems and tracks and where you can start stem mixing. Also, stick around at the end for a little bonus tip in there as well. And always, all of these videos are recorded live on Twitch, so if you'd like to join in the live chat, please go down to the description below and follow me on my Twitch channel, that way you don't miss a thing. Also, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe, it helps out the channel and that way you guys don't miss a thing. Anyway, enough chatter, let's get on with it. Now, stem mastering and mixing can be a bit elusive sometimes. You can be a bit unsure as to what it is and what to do with it. And I think the main reason becomes there's a bit of an unsurety as to what stems are. The word stem is misused quite frequently especially amongst more recent engineers, and I'd been actually misusing the word myself for a long time as well. So people think that stems for a bit of music for a recording are the individual tracks. That's not really the case. Stems actually are not the tracks themselves, but they're the tracks grouped together. So a stem is usually something of all of these tracks being brought together. So you can get like the final stem, which can be the whole track brought together rather than individual tracks. So what we do in stem mastering is we'll group certain things together. So likes of the track that we've actually got up that we're doing just now in the stream, I've grouped up the drums, I've grouped up the vocals, or I've grouped up the drums, the lead vocals, the backing vocals, the guitars, and then the bass is on its own as well. But all of the different tracks are sent through to another track, which I've bounced down, grouped together, bounced down, all of the effects as well. You have to make sure that you've got all of the reverbs and the delays in the appropriate tracks as well when you're doing stem mastering. So the first time I actually did stem mixing mastering, it's people, they call it different things like mixing and mastering. I mean, mixing and mastering are two different things, but stem mixing and mastering are the same thing, more or less. They're pretty much the same thing. They're the same process. You go through all the same stuff. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to call it stem mixing from now on. So stem mixing. First time I got asked to do it, somebody had found me through Facebook on one of my ads and stuff like that, and they'd asked me if I did stem mastering or stem mixing. And at first I was like, I didn't say anything to the guy, but I wasn't too sure what exactly it was he was asking of me. So I had to search it up, and I realized that yeah, I did do stem mastering. I just didn't know it was called that. I always mixed the groups in relation with each other within each bits with all the different groups, all the different stems. So that was easy enough. It is probably worth, if you're talking to another maybe recording engineer or mixing engineer, it is worth clarifying when they ask for stems, because this confusion can come up. You might ask somebody for stems, they give you actual stems when really what you were looking for was the track. So make sure and clarify with the recording engineer or the artist or whoever it is you're sending it off to or picking it up from, that they know the difference between stems and tracks. That is one of the biggest things, and they can save a lot of time and a lot of hassle with that. So one of the first places we can start off with stem mixing and stem mastering is we can start off with doing the levels. So we're gonna pull up Reaper now and actually get it going. So just make sure it's up. Yeah, that's fine. So we're going to pull up Reaper, and I've actually already set up the stems. Now, as I've made clear, make sure your routing is perfect, else you could have you could end up with a lot of problems. I spent a lot of time before the stream making sure that all the right routing was correct. So, for example, the great thing about Pro Tools is when you solo save something, like usually like the delays and reverbs, when you solo another track, that stays open if that track is sending a signal to it. So if you soloed that and then bounced it out, then you'll just hear the reverb. But for some reason, maybe it's to do with my routing in Reaper, but if you've soloed like the delay, it'll just bring everything through, everything that's in it. So I had to make sure that I got the simple the various things. So I'm just gonna put my headphones on and then we can get started. Right, so I've got all the different stems here all bounced out. I've got the drums, the backing vocals, the bass stem, the vocals, and the guitar stems as well. So we can hear this, and you can hear that I'll have all the effects on it as well. So it's got all of the compression, it's got all of the mixing done to it. It's got the parallel compression along with it in the particular volume. It's also got the reverbs going through it, the particular drum reverbs. As you can hear, there's no other reverbs. There's none of the vocals or the guitars coming through into it. Okay, and we've also got we'll also just go through these individually, just so you can hear them. It's the backing vocals. You can hear all there's still the bleed coming through, but that's not a big deal too much. All the stereo images kept proper, so you can hear some of them in the far left, some in the far right. We got the bass stem, which is just a mono. I mean, that is 2 different bass tracks going through the one, so that's why I did do that as well. That's the lead vocal. And then we got the guitars. And they've also got the delays on them as well. So everything is there. We're not missing one thing. And you have to go through a checklist of that. I've had to go through them a few times because sometimes I've cut them out. I actually end up accidentally cutting out the tambourine and the shaker. And to be honest, I do not miss them in this track. So I decided to leave them out altogether. I think they actually benefit not having them. It was just clutter. Okay, so the first thing we can do when we're stem mixing and mastering is simply the levels. Sounds simple, but it is one of the most important things. Now, it is best when you get these stems in, you'll probably find a lot of them already have a good balance. They've already been mixed well enough that they should have a good balance. So sometimes this is a process that is a lot of tweaking. It's not necessarily, you're not going to be doing hard mixing. You're not going to be going all out. At least I don't think you should be, unless you feel it's necessary. If it's necessary, I would go back to the mixing stage personally. If there's particular things that you feel you need to be aggressive with, then you need to go back to the full mix to really get that going. I still feel like there are some tweaks to the volumes we can do here, but what you can also do is you can automate them afterwards. I usually like to get a good balance first and then automate afterwards, because there will be things that you want to bring up, things you want to pull down, that kind of stuff. So, but I always find the automation is for a later date, and I will be doing that as a tutorial next week if you're interested in learning more about automation, and it won't just be with volume. There'll be a lot of different plugins. There'll be a lot of EQing and compression, how you can automate those, image processing as well, how to get a proper, how to open up those mixes at the right moment. So there'll be a lot of that next week. Right, the vocal's nice and aggressive, but I feel like it needs to pull down a little bit. It's a little bit too much. No, that's too much. It's not bad. One thing I like about Reaper is that you can actually set icons to these tracks. So that's kind of, if you're wondering what I'm doing, it's just so I can see everything a lot easier. Those vocals, I kind of like how far back they are. I did that intentionally, right enough. I'm going to push them up slightly, see if I can do with a little bit more volume, but I don't think... Not bad. Okay, that's actually not so bad. That's actually quite some good levels there with very minor tweaking. It was definitely like very, very, very minor tweaking. I do feel like I'll have to automate through it. There is some stuff I feel like I could dip out, dip in, but I also did a lot of that with compression. If you watch my earlier streams or check out my YouTube channel as well, you will notice that I did a lot of in process like dipping and ducking a lot of the time as well. I just want to make sure that that particular, when those drums come in, they actually hit and batter rather than, because first time we had it in, it was a bit weak. It didn't. See, what I feel like I would do is I would probably bring the, if we automated it a wee bit, I would have that guitar stem down a bit lower, and then have it come, kind of push up at that moment. What might actually be worth doing as well is just kind of bringing everything down in relation to each other. That way I've got a little bit more headroom as well. Oh, I can pull these. Okay, right, that's fine. So what we can do now is we can go for the individual tracks. I like to, when it comes to stem mixing, when I'm mixing, I like to start with the vocals, but when I'm stem mixing, for some reason, I prefer just starting with the drums. So what we'll do is we'll pull up an EQ for that. Now, EQ, you have to think very differently with stem mixing. The main reason you need to think differently is because when you're mixing and you're doing all of the individual instruments, you're thinking of all of the individual parts of that instrument. For example, when you're EQing a snare drum, you could think of that boomy low end and then you just take that out. Or you want to have that thud roughly about like 120, 150 hertz. Or maybe you want closer to that snap as well, roughly at about like 1.5 to 2K, roughly about those. Whereas when you're EQing particular tracks, particular stems, you have to think of that EQ as the instrument rather than the element of that instrument, if that makes sense. So, for example, we could listen to this. Right. You could see if the kick drum resides roughly about 130. So if I did that, it would bring the kick up. It also brings some, but you have to remember it'll also bring up some of that low end in the snare as well. Or if I do this, that's more the shimmer of more of the harshness of the cymbals right enough. So I'm not going to be doing that. So this is kind of stem mixing is actually closer to mastering, I would say, because you were wanting to do minute tweaks. You're not wanting to go crazy with it. Sometimes I find like there could still be a little bit of muddiness in there, so I could take a little bit out. I would probably tighten that up, that way because there's that nice dip, it kind of makes the kick a little bit punchier. I would also consider working with the stereo image as well. I already did, like I said, with this one you've got like the mid side. I'm pretty sure I took the low end out of the sides because it's just not necessary. So that probably won't make much of a difference, really. I could add a little bit more snap to that snare if I wanted, and I'll also do it with the rest of the instruments. Right, let's do it. Right, I feel like I've actually made those cymbals a little too bright. I had an intention of making them like really stand out, and honestly I think they sound a little bit harsh. So I've just rolled it down a little bit. Nothing too dramatic. But I have brought up that 2K to add a little bit more snap to the snare. So I feel like most of this has got its place, but let's just kind of go through the rest of the instruments and we'll EQ them as we go. I didn't make the lead vocals, or not the lead vocals, the backing vocals. I did make them quite dull, just to give them that sense of distance and space. You can see there's very little low end, so that's not so bad. I'm gonna take out some of the high mids just to make it a bit warmer. I'm going to do the mid side in this one because just to keep it far more mono. I feel like I could do with a little bit more grit and presence. just make sure you can hear it throughout the whole. Just a little bit more presence added to it, so. Because I mean, like, obviously the bass guitar is there to really like add emphasis and grit to like that beefiness to the guitars themselves. But I do feel it's still got a little bit lost. That way, I've just added a little bit more presence to it. Again, you could probably consider that this section isn't really stem mixing, just because it's more or less the same thing, but it does have 2 tracks in it, and it's all centered. But again, you keep the bass guitar to yourself. But that's the beauty of it, is that. But the bass section might not be a bass guitar. It might be some use your words. Might be a double bass, or it could be some bass synths. Some of the tracks that I used to like make myself, I loved bass synths, but I would always have varying bass synths. I would have one for more of the low end and one that would drive it a little bit more. So you might actually have multiple bass instruments. I usually recommend trying to steer away from multiple bass instruments. One bass instrument's enough. There's nothing worse than when you've got a bass guitar and a piano player vying for that low end. The piano player should understand if there's going to be a bass guitar or a bass instrument, then they should keep away from that low end for the most part. Else it'll just kind of muddy up. It'll be hard to define the 2 instruments, and it'll not be pleasant. It'll not reinforce anything. But there, like I said, there are times when there are multiple bass instruments. Heck, there's a kick drum in the drum, so you've got to work out how to sonically balance those frequencies. But we're not really. I'm digressing here. We're actually supposed to be going on more about the stem mastering and the stem mixing. Now, what I could have done was I could have probably gone back a little bit on the vocals. Again, this is the vocals on their own, but it's also got the delays, the parallel distortion, the parallel compression. It's got the delays on it as well. So it has added a little bit of sibilance to it. Now, one thing I would like to stress is don't go adding things where you don't feel it's necessary. If nothing's necessary, if it's good as it is, then leave it at that. That is generally the best way to go. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So. Yeah, I don't actually think the guitars need anything. I think the guitars are quite happy where they are. Right. So, the next thing we can do with this is we can compress it. Now, again, as I said previously, it's similar to mastering where you don't want to go crazy. You don't want to go smashing it. We've already had quite a bit of compression. We did parallel compression with the drums. But one of my favorite things to do is to add small bits of compression, and it sort of adds it sort of works like a glue. If you want to put it that way, it actually makes every individual instruments sound like they're in the same room together, like they're with each other. They're not just recorded individually. It's not like it's the snare recorded on its own, it's not the kick recorded on its own, or the overheads recorded on its own. It's everything together. It clamps down everything. But again, we have to make it, we have to be kind of conservative with it. So if I pull up this one, could just make it nice and light. Like that'll be way too much. What you really want to do is just catch some of those major peaks. And I think I'll put our ratio down to 2:1. Make a fast attack, at least, with a moderate release. So it definitely brings a little bit of punch, and like it pulls it together. It's a very subtle move. I appreciate that. It might be a little bit difficult for you to hear, especially if you're not listening on headphones like this. But it is a great thing to pull it all together and do this with. I like to do this with most of the instruments that have multiple instruments. I'm not so fussed about doing it on the bass guitar or the lead vocal on its own, but I'll do it a bit with the guitars. I'll do it a bit with the backing vocals as well. So let's do it with the backing vocals. Now, do remember, if you compress anything with reverb on it, it's also going to bring that reverb up as well. So that's why we're doing it really, really minutely here. But I have used compression on reverbs as well, and it can add some interesting effects, like some interesting results out of it. Especially if you want that reverb to be the front and center of an effect. Same with delays, you can do the same as a delay. Let's go with the guitars. I feel like they could do with a little bit more. I might actually go a little bit aggressive with this. I would say do as I say, don't do as I do. but you can do what you want. So compression is such a versatile thing. You'll find that any mixing engineer, their bread and butter is EQ and compression. Right, I've actually got one more technique that we can actually go through, which is a good one. I quite enjoy doing it, and it helps if you end up getting tracks, not necessarily stem mix, but I did have one track where the artist gave me all of the drums, all just the drum stems. Everything else was in tracks, but it was just the drum stems. So one thing you can do is you can pull up a multiband compressor. If you're not sure what a multiband compressor is, I have mentioned them in the past, but we will actually just add it here. Now, it does the same thing as a compressor. It squashes the dynamics, it brings everything down, but it does it by frequency. It does it by particular parts. I did have one, like I said, I had one track in that actually, where the drums were just a stem of the drums. They didn't give me the individual snare or the individual kick. It was all the drums together. But the main problem was, in that track, was the tom. The tom was too loud in the mix. So if you feel you can do it yourself, then pull up a multiband compressor. Most DAWs don't come with a multiband compressor. So I would recommend, this is a little bit of an older one, but it still works, is the C4 multiband parametric processor from Waves. Great plugin. It's saved me so many times. I use it for mastering as well. You can also, you can tell by the number, the C4 basically, it does 4 different bands. I think there's a C6 as well, which does 6 different bands. I've never needed that many, but if you feel you need it, it might be genre dependent. You go for it. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to bypass these things first of all. And let's see if we can solo a particular instrument. I don't think this needs it, but let's try to get those toms, right? Those toms like right at the beginning here. Let's see if we just look this wee bit here. Look at that. Right, what I can try to do is, what you can do is you can gain it, you can boost the gain on it, so that way you can actually check to find it first. Right, roughly about there. And then what we can do is we can bring that back down. And then it'll just start compressing just to bring that down ever so slightly. You can change the attack. Might want it a little bit faster, but then have the release quite a bit faster as well. And then you can choose how much it also goes. So you can also bring it up as well if you put the range up. But and then you can choose the thing here. The great thing is you can also solo that band as well, so you can hear what it sounds like. Now, guys, I just used that as an example, but honestly, I don't feel like it needs it. I quite like where the toms are. I guess I'm just rubbing my own ego at that point, aren't I? Just telling myself how good I am at this job. But no, that's genuinely not the case. Not that I'm not good at this job, just I don't like rubbing my own ego. And in fact, let's see if we can actually bring those up. Gotta get that self-love, yeah, exactly, man, exactly. Gotta love yourself first. If you can't love yourself, who can love you? I said that was the last trick, but I've actually gone and forgotten one, which I forgot to actually note down in my book here. I've got another one which I have mentioned again in the past, but this is something I like. Like I said, I got one client in who it was mostly like, it was sort of like a 80s disco dance track that he'd got in. It's actually on my website as well, as part of my portfolio, and I felt like some of the transitions are really good. But one thing you can do is if you feel like your mix is really narrow, you can push in stereo imager. Spatial ozone. I quite like the ozone imager. It's free from Isotope, I believe. I'm pretty sure I got it for free anyway, and I use this thing so much. It is one of my favorite effects. It's really simple and it has such great impact. So what we can do is we can actually make it sound wider. Now, this is something you have to be careful with. If you push it too far, it can start to phase, and it'll sound really unnatural, and it'll actually sound weaker as well. So if I push this really too far, see, everything's all over the place, kind of washy. But what I usually like to do is, instead of actually adding more space to it, what I'll usually do is I'll automate it by, like, I'll probably narrow a certain instrument, and then come like a certain point, maybe like a drop or something like that, I'll bypass it. That way the image goes to where it should be, and it just sounds larger. So I could actually do it this bit. So I've actually narrowed the image, the spatial image of this. So it sounds a little bit narrower, a bit more mono. And then what I would do is I would bypass it at this moment. So it just sounds wider. Also do it with the guitars. I do it with the guitars a lot more. Makes them sound... Let's actually do it more aggressively with the guitars. At the same moment as well. So if I do this... Right, have that really mono. So then the guitars just wide and open up. I'd usually like put the level up as well to make it sound a wee bit more obvious. Thank you very much, guys, for watching. And as I said earlier, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. That way you guys don't miss a thing. If you're interested in more in what I do, or if you would like a mix critique, please head down to my website, which is down in the description below, and contact me through there. And maybe you could actually get a little bit more out of it. Thank you very much for joining us, and I really hope your snares are sounding real punchy.